Clodagh, we're back to the trial involving Conor McGregor and his friend James Lawrence. Nikita Hand, a hair colourist, is suing McGregor and Lawrence, saying she was raped. They have both claimed that they had consensual sex with her. So it's civil proceedings in front of a jury. We finished on Friday, you and I, and you were saying that it was going to open with evidence about, she's picked up 2 days after her Christmas party. We've been through that. She went to her Christmas party. She ended up in a hotel, in the Beacon Hotel, with McGregor and Lawrence, and she alleges a series of things happened there, which they deny. She goes home to her own house in the following morning, which is 2 mornings after her Christmas party. She goes to her mother's house and an ambulance is called for her at this point. And that's where we were due to open this morning.
Yeah, so that's where proceedings started today. The first person on the stand as a witness was Neil Dempsey from the ambulance service. He was a paramedic with Dublin Fire Brigade, which he still is. So he opened up his testimony by discussing that morning. So it was about 8:40 in the morning when he was called to a home in Drimnagh. He was working with his colleague Ethna Scully, who we also hear from later on in the day. He described how he got to the home in Drimnagh, which is that of Nikita Hand's mother, Debbie. He got to the home, went upstairs, and the woman in the bed, who he now knows to be Nikita Hand, was described as being quite distressed, pulled back and afraid. He also described her having marks. Physically, he said that she had visible marks around her throat and breast. And when asking her what happened, she said she was sexually assaulted. Her chief concern at that time was that she had a tampon inside her, and she was particularly concerned about that. Then his colleague Ethna came into the room. Garda also came in at this point, but Nikita became even more distressed when they went in. And when asked by the judge what did he mean by distressed, he described her as crying and being visibly upset. At this point, she did mention to him that she had been in a hotel. He took it up as something like a penthouse hotel, but it wasn't really taking notes. He kind of took notes after speaking with Nikita. She was then taken to the sexual assault treatment unit in the Rotunda. And in the ambulance, then he described taking her vital signs. She had an elevated heart rate. He said at this point in the ambulance, it will be best practice to take blood pressure, other vital signs like that. But because Nikita Hand was so distressed, he decided not to do so. He didn't want to cause her any further distress. Before they pulled away from the home, he left the ambulance and allowed Ethna to speak to Nikita within. Garda also got into the ambulance at one point, which caused her further distress. We do see this on CCTV, which I'll describe now in a moment. But he said that this caused her more distress, so he asked them to leave. He then called ahead to the unit in Rotunda to let them know. Normally, Garda don't travel in the ambulance, but they did follow behind. And they got to the Rotunda about 40 minutes later. So then we're shown CCTV footage of the inside of the ambulance. So this footage in total length is about 57 minutes. They skip to about 6 minutes in, where we can see Miss Hand getting into the ambulance with Neil, who is the witness on the stand at this point of the day. Ethna Scully then gets in a moment later. The ambulance at this point is still stationary. They haven't left outside her mother's home. Generally, again, we can see Miss Scully examining Nikita's lower limbs. There's bruising showing on her thighs, and there's also bruising on her lower knee. At this point, Nikita left the...
This is evidence given by Neil Scully.
This is evidence given by Neil Scully. At this point, Nikita left the courtroom as the CCTV was playing.
Right.
Cross-examination continued in her absence. The judge asked if she had been administered any medication at this point, any painkillers, anything like that, and Neil said he did not recall. Gardaí then can be seen entering the ambulance at a side door, and they were in the ambulance for a couple of minutes. At this point, we can just see the Garda in the ambulance speaking to Nikita, and Ethna Scully is also there. We don't get any descriptor from Neil about what the Garda says about that conversation.
So all of this footage is being played, and bit by bit, Nikita Hand's lawyers are putting to him what is happening, and he's giving the evidence about what's happening.
Yes, exactly. But there's no kind of conversation about what the guard said, any of that sort of what was going on in the ambulance during that time. We then just see, at this point then Nikita came back into court herself, obviously there this morning. Her mother then we see getting into the ambulance. Nikita is sitting up in bed. She's becoming more distressed. It's described that she's having faster breathing, a faster heart rate. So they ask her to sit up into a position of comfort. She then moves onto a seat of the ambulance. At this point she's lying on, I suppose, a stretcher or a gurney in the ambulance. She moves over and she sits on one of the seats in the ambulance. Neil says at this point he can't recall if she had gotten sick or not, but her head was bent over in her lap. And he said that at this point her T4 was still the tampon and the pains she had in that area. The judge asked at this point if Ethna had been photoshopped out of the footage at all, but he was told that she was driving the ambulance, so that's why she was not seen in this footage. 53 minutes into this CCTV, again, it's about 57 minutes long. We see them getting out of the ambulance, and at this point, it's best practice for a patient, we're told, to be brought into the hospital by trolley. Some patients might be embarrassed to go in lying down. In this event, we were told that Nikita went into hospital in a wheelchair because she wanted to sit upright because of how she was feeling. There was then a brief cross-examination from Conor McGregor's legal team, just asking about the Garda statement that Neil Dempsey made 4 days later. And it was put to him that when he was asked what happened, Nikita said that she hardly remembered, but she had said that she had been raped. And he also noted that in his statement, Nikita's mother on a couple of occasions, Nikita said to her mother, "Ma'am, don't say," when asked in relation to who the perpetrator was. The judge then asked if there was any signs of intoxication, if Nikita was, intoxicated, drunk or anything like that at this stage. And he said no, that she was just presenting as somebody who was very upset. And James Lawrence's legal team didn't have any questions at this point.
Okay. So is Ethna, what's Ethna's second name?
Ethna Scully.
Ethna Scully. Was she up next?
Yes. So she was on the stand next. She's been a paramedic for 16 years. So she kind of reiterated the fact that she had been in the ambulance that morning with her colleague. They were called out to a home in Drimnagh on the morning of the 10th of December. When she got to the scene, she said the patient was lying down and she was, quote, very withdrawn, very agitated and upset. She also said that the woman's chief concern was that the tampon that she had in had been pushed up way too far. Describing the patient, she said she had a small cut in her chin and there appeared to be some bruising around her neck, her lower neck in particular. She had pajamas on, and that's all that she could see at that point. She also went on to further examine her within the ambulance. So we see this CCTV footage. We can see Ethna visually examining Nikita within the ambulance. She says that she was taken outside into the ambulance because there was poor lighting inside. At this point, she said there was an injury on her breast, and she found, upon examination, she's seen the bruising on her chest, legs, buttocks, thighs, and one of her lower legs. And she was asked to rate the severity of the bruising. And she says, I haven't actually seen anyone so bruised, that intensity, that amount of bruising on a person. So she requested to see the injuries. It wasn't Nikita who turned around and said to her, I want you to take a look at these. She said, quote, she told me that she'd been grabbed around the neck. She said something about trying to fight somebody off and that if there was a threat made to her, I can't remember the exact words. At this stage, she didn't name who the attacker was or who she was going to allege had been the one to cause those bruises and injuries to her. Neil told Ethna that Nikita's vitals were slightly elevated, and this all again took place in the ambulance before it moved off. she confirmed that she'd seen the CCTV when it was being played back to Neil. The judge had asked if she had spoken to the Garda in the ambulance, and she said yes. She was driving the ambulance, of course, to the rotunda, but she said it was her impression that Nikita was upset, distressed, curled up, and she said that she came out of the ambulance in a curled up, distressed position, and again reiterated that she was taken into the hospital in in a wheelchair. And there was no cross-examination, follow-up questions from either Conor McGregor's legal team or James Lawrence's legal team.
Who comes next then?
The next person up on the stand was Dr. Emma Quinn, and this is the doctor that Nikita seen on the 19th of December. So this was 10 days after the alleged rape. And she is a GP at Walkinstown Medical Centre, where Nikita is a long-standing patient of the practice. So Dr. Emma Quinn is not her GP, wouldn't be someone she would see regularly. We do hear later from Dr. Clark, who is her GP and has known her for the last 20 years. So we hear a lot more from him. But Dr. Emma Quinn, she's on the stand briefly. She says that Nikita came into her on the 19th of December because she had been assaulted and she was complaining of a pain in her neck. Particularly, she was saying that she had a sensation of a lump in her neck, and she was described as being distressed at the time, Nikita was. The doctor examined her neck looking for any lumps or swelling. She said there was no bruising on Nikita at the time that she could see, but she wouldn't expect there to be because it was 9 days after the alleged incident. There was tenderness on the left side of her neck, and she said that was consistent with internal bruising and consistent with what she had been told by Nikita about being held forcibly. She had tenderness and pain in that area. So she was diagnosed with internal bruising, which she said would take a lot longer to resolve than any of those external bruises that she may have had. And they can be there, internal bruising, for a few weeks after an injury. There was a brief cross-examination from Conor McGregor's legal team.
This is Remy Farrell, Senior Counsel?
This is, yes, exactly. And it was just in relation to two visits that she had to the clinic, one on the 3rd of April 2017 and one on the 8th of May 2018. Now, it was referred back that it might be better for Dr. Frank Clark to deal with those because he had more of the notes pertaining to that in his possession, and as well as that, he has, again, her GP for 20
For long
years.
term, yeah.
Exactly. No cross-examination by James Lawrence, and that brought to an end her time on the stand.
Okay. So her own GP?
Her own GP did take to the stand, yes. And he said that he met her in the early 2000s when she was a child, and met her and her mother over the years, both together and separately. So, supporting one another at appointments. He said that she didn't attend the clinic very often, but she does, so she didn't really have an extensive set of records from when she was a child, but she started to visit more often as a teenager and an adult. So we went back into then, it was mentioned kind of near the beginning of the trial that Nikita Hand was prescribed sertraline in June of 2018. So there was examination from Nikita Hand's legal team in relation to this. He was explaining why she had been
Did he
describe it?
Yeah, exactly. Did he describe what it is or what it's for?
Yeah, so sertraline is a SRI, which is an antidepressant. So he explained that Nikita Hand had a history of over many years of being anxious, and she kind of struggled at times to manage with life. She described that she was a hairdresser, she had a child, her mother also needed support, and she often struggled with her confidence. So he described her as somebody who has a low capacity to manage anxiety. Sometimes people with a depressed mood and this low capacity to manage anxiety can be prescribed something like an SSRI, like sertraline. He said that it is very common for people to be prescribed it. Many professional people take it. It isn't something that's addictive. He said it's normal for people to start on a low dose, like 25 to 50 milligrams, and then titrate that upwards as they get used to it. He said that it could go up to 200 milligrams a day, but she was on the lower end of the spectrum. He kind of talked about you can have these side effects. So he said some of them are, one of them he described it as paradoxal emerging anxiety, but he didn't kind of go into that any further. He also said that you can have gastrointestinal issues such as nausea and diarrhea, and this can be transient, so it can start and it can go away. He said that, once you take it, it's not a sedative. People can drive. He said, be a barrister or a doctor or a surgeon. People have a depletion in a coping chemistry, and this is just something that can help them to adjust to that. And he said that sometimes people are just genetically predisposed to having a lower level of this coping chemistry.
Right.
So then in November of 2020, he had to do this kind of report for legal proceedings. So he said this was going to be a summary of her various attendance with the clinic since March of 2019. He spoke about the fact that she was going for psychological therapy and counselling with a very specialised practitioner, and it was his role to supervise and encourage that and not to actually take part in that process. He then did a report on the 1st of March 2019 saying that sometimes she went alone to her visits, sometimes she went with her mother or other people with her as well because she was struggling to cope. On the 15th of May 2019, she was declared unfit for work and asked why she was declared unfit for work. He said that she was working as a hairdresser, and in that particular environment in a local hairdressing salon, he said it's very performance orientated. You need to be cheery and positive, but she wasn't coping and she felt very conscious about what had happened to her, particularly in relation to social media. There were people making comments about that and she was in fear of being identified, so she felt like she couldn't work. During that period of time, she remained on sertraline and was having counselling. She also had some back strain, so she was having physio. He said that having a psychological injury or pain, like having a back strain, you would have physiotherapy, but sometimes you might need painkillers to help you get through the physiotherapy. So he said for her, having sertraline was a kind of a painkiller for her to get through working through her emotions with her therapist. She went up on a higher dose of the medication, which was 100 to 150 milligrams, but unfortunately she was having some issues with tolerating the higher dose. In particular, she was having this gastrointestinal stomach upset. So she actually interpreted that as having stress. She didn't interpret it as something to do with the medication. She thought that it was stress from what she was emotionally going through. So eventually she was kind of brought back down in the dosage and those symptoms wore off. So that means that they were able to differentiate between her symptoms of PTSD, which she was diagnosed with, and the symptoms of her just not being able to tolerate the medication. So that was kind of an important thing for them to, I suppose, mention on the stand and kind of make that differentiation. So he went on to detail a number of different medications that she'd been put on for her symptoms for anxiety and for PTSD. There were things like sedatives and as well, he just mentioned that she was having kind of ongoing counselling to help her with her mental health. Then there was a report done in April of this year in 2024 for the court. He said that she had had numerous consultations with him since 2020, but this assessment in particular was based on her in the position she was in April of 2024. She said that she was continuing with regular psychotherapy for PTSD. She had been off the sertraline since January 2024 because of those issues we had discussed. And at that time in April, she was on a mild medication for sleep because she was pretty anxious about using medication and said that she'd rather use therapy. She also had PTSD symptoms at that time. She had been in a dark place a couple of times, but she had brought that back under control with the support of her partner and also with changes to her lifestyle. So the Dr. Clark then did go into describing PTSD, again, like I said, what it is, the symptoms, how it was diagnosed. But this is kind of the next witness goes into that in a lot greater detail, particularly in relation to Nikita Hand. So we'll kind of go over that then instead of doing it twice. But he spoke a lot about work being a trigger for her, she had difficulty coping with her relationship because, her relationship ended up failing. She met her current partner in late 2020, which she said was a positive thing for her, that she's been able to manage to maintain that. And he's able to support her with better choices. She's in a more stable state. She's making good progress as well around those lines. Then there was discussion around Nikita and her use of alcohol. So the doctor stated that she's not an alcoholic, but she did have episodes where she would go out with an underlying tendency. He said that she has for anxiety. Anxiety reduces your inhibitions, and it can also make you quite impulsive. It also, he said, causes depression, mood drops and suicidal thoughts. He said that people with a family history of anxiety can be heavy drinkers. It could be a social pattern.
And is he talking in general here during this evidence?
He does seem to be talking in general. And then he says Nikita is not drinking a bottle of vodka every day for 3 or 4 months. He said that's not the situation at all. He was he mentioned that she wasn't an alcoholic. She wasn't doing this, but didn't specify what she was doing. He then spoke about her having flashbacks, and this is again another symptom of PTSD, but in particular, he mentioned that she hasn't been able to have cervical screening tests. She's been finding it very difficult to do it. She did have in 2021, she managed to have one done where they found minor abnormalities, which would require further investigation, but she hasn't been able to go back to do that since. And the doctor said that it was worrying for him that she hadn't been managed to do that. He also said that she had serious physical and psychological injuries. These significant ongoing symptoms will require ongoing treatment.
And this is related to her allegations of the rape that McGregor and Lawrence deny.
Exactly, yes. So then he kind of again went into the PTSD symptoms. Then there was a quick cross-examination from Conor McGregor's legal team. And it was asked of him what diagnostic criteria he used to diagnose the PTSD. So there's 2 different ones you can use, the DSM-5 and the ICD-11. One is American and it's a lot more detailed, and the ICD-11 is a lot less detailed.
Okay.
So it was put to him that it was a fundamental part of the diagnosis that you had to be part of or witness a terrifying event to be diagnosed with PTSD, and he said yes. Then he was asked a little bit about her taking sertraline, and she did take it every day when she was on the medication, but she's not anymore. It was put to him that if Miss Hand was not an alcoholic, was it heavy social drinking she was partaking in? And he said yes, but as he explained, he said it's common in people with underlying anxiety, people who are shy and retiring, to use alcohol to hide those feelings. And he said Irish people are quite anxious in general and use alcohol as a means to mask their anxiety. It was then noted that specifically on the 20th of September 2018, Nikita had presented with anxiety, and this is in relation to a car crash that took place in 2016. There was a medical legal report in relation to that, and it was described that she had a whiplash type event. It was also put to him that she was certified unfit for work at one point, and it was put to him that it was in relation to this in 2017, 2018, in relation to the car crash which happened in December
prior to the event,
and prior to the event, exactly. That she had back pain, anxiety, and she was seeing a physiotherapist when she was very stressed out about missing work due to said back pain. And he said yes, but it was completely different to PTSD. He said that in 2018, she had anxiety in the context of she wasn't able to cope in work because she was standing on her feet all day. And it was expected that her injury would resolve sooner. This is relating to the whiplash. But because of the nature of the job that she was doing, standing over people, bending down at work, this kind of exacerbated her recovery, so prolonged it for her. So she was having this anxiety and stress about not being able to go to work. And that's in relation to that. And there was no further cross-examination from James Lawrence's legal team.
Okay. So then we come on, I think, to her final witness, who is an expert in sexual assaults and post-traumatic stress disorder?
Yes. So we had Dr. Anne Leader, who was, she's a psychiatrist, she said, since she was 26 and is now 72. She said she's seen over 5,000 cases of people with alleged sexual abuse. So it is her area of expertise. So she's seen Nikita Hand on two events, the 4th of December 2020 and the 9th of April 2024. So the judge told the jury that they wouldn't be getting the reports, that they would just be hearing her evidence in relation to those reports. So on the 4th of December 2020, she met with Nikita to prepare the first medical report. So at this point, she had access to the doctor's medical notes, from her GP notes from the medical practice. And she also was determined with Nikita, her age, her employment position, etc. At this point, she was living at home with her daughter, and she was unemployed at the time that they saw one another.
So is Dr. Anne Leader presenting as she's an expert witness? So she's somebody that Nikita Hand has gone to, attended, first time, I think, 2 years nearly after this alleged rape, and the second time this year. So is she going to her just as an expert witness, as in for the court case?
Yes. So she has access to the doctor's medical notes, and obviously she's having an interview with Nikita. So she is preparing this medical report
for the court case.
For the court case. So this was this was back obviously when the Garda sent a file to the DPP to consider charges. So that was the first time. And then when this was coming to
civil proceedings
again, she compiled another one. So she, like I said, had access in 2020 to Nikita's medical notes from the doctor. By the time 2024 came around, she had not only Nikita's medical notes, but she also had notes from her counselling sessions, therapy sessions, stuff like that. So she was asked, basically she said that she had a long discussion with the plaintiff when she met her. There was a 150-page statement as well from the Garda that was at her disposal, exactly,
in relation to the criminal charges that the DPP didn't take.
Yeah, so she had that at her disposal to review, as well as therapy notes, and she said she analysed both. She also examined Nikita, so in conversation. Conor McGregor's legal team said that they hadn't been given a copy of the report and didn't want Mr. Gordon to lead the witness. And Mr. Gordon said, "My friend is very nervous. I don't intend to lead the witness. We just want the jury to be aware of the extent of the notes and the record in the notes." The witness said that she recorded the number of times the therapist made notes. So these are the notes from the Rape Crisis Centre. And again, Mr. Farrell for Conor McGregor's team asked Mr. Gordon not to lead the witness. So this comes up again later on in the day. But yeah, she noted every time Nikita had seen her counsellor at the Rape Crisis Centre, which was over 20 times from a period of early January 2019 and the middle of 2020. She reviewed the notes, she said, in detail. So all of those notes, she said that the rape account that Nikita had given to the therapist was the same account that was given to her. Nikita had said that she felt like she was losing all control of her life. She was falling apart. And she had fears that the pictures of her bruised body may circulate online. She said that her daughter and her partner were suffering because she couldn't function as normal. Garda advised her that Mr. X, who we now know is Conor McGregor, his friend, had consensual sex, but she said she had no memory of that occurring. She said that she felt like a lump of meat. She said that she was under strain with her partner. She felt like she shouldn't be there for her daughter, and she couldn't negotiate the relationship at all. At this point then, she noted all the dates in which Nikita Hand had those counselling sessions, and it's at this point that Conor McGregor's legal team asked for a copy of the report, to which Nikita Hand's legal team said that if my friend has a report, we wanted to. Basically, he's saying that Conor McGregor's legal team also had a psychiatrist do a report, but it wasn't reciprocal, so they wouldn't give him a copy of their report, so he wasn't going to give them a copy of his report. But he said, if my friend wants a copy of the report, I'll still give it to him. Mr. Farrell then said, before the witness gave evidence, we asked for the report, but we were told no, to which Mr. Gordon replied, we said no because it wasn't on a reciprocal basis. They weren't going to give them theirs if they wouldn't give him theirs. So at this point then, the examination of Dr. Leader continued. She said that in her medical opinion, for the mental state examination, it was referred to as, she said that Miss Hand was anxious and tearful, and in her opinion, she came across as somebody who was traumatized. She also said that having heard their history, watched her demeanor, and on the report, it was of her impression that she came to the conclusion that she had severe PTSD, and said that she could list those symptoms if necessary. So the first one, she said, was Nikita Hand felt depersonalized. So she said this is something that's quite common. So people who suffer a traumatic event, they detach from it. So she said something that's traumatic and shocking and they can't process it, so they become detached from it. She said that Nikita Hand had described looking down on her body from somewhere else during the ordeal, so she felt detached. She also described that she just kind of gave up and allowed what to happen. She said that she wasn't thinking straight during the ordeal, again, which is a very common feature of PTSD. The first criteria is that there must have been a traumatic event, and the doctor said that in her opinion, the event described to her would be regarded as an event that was very traumatic, as not only Nikita perceived it, but also how she relayed it. She said there was 3 different categories of symptoms: avoiding, re-experience, and anxiety, to which she said that she met the threshold of all of those, because the threshold of experiencing all those different things means that you have to have them to a severe level, to the point where they impact your everyday level of functioning, and she did meet those symptoms. So she said avoidance was things like blocking emotions and memories. She withdrew for life. She wasn't really able to be fully present with those around her. Again, that re-experiencing, she had nightmares, intrusive, persistent, distressing thoughts, as well as flashbacks and panic attacks when a memory was triggered. And she was also had classical physical and psychological symptoms. So those things were frequent panic attacks, which are described as fast heartbeat, shortness of breath, dizziness, feeling like you might die or pass out. Other symptoms of PTSD, she had described having a diminished circle of friends. She can't trust others and felt like she was suspicious of men. She feels permanently altered by what happened, which is a common symptom of PTSD. And she also said that after the assault, Nikita was experiencing suicidal thoughts. She had significant symptoms, again, those flashbacks. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, spent a lot of time in bed and felt like she wanted to die. She couldn't dirty, and she couldn't function. She also said that Nikita felt dirty, ashamed and guilty. She said that these were symptoms that in themselves, losing interest in life, became very destructive for Nikita. She also said that these, in her opinion, and how she was currently in 2020, she was anxious and embarrassed and very tearful while discussing her ordeal as well as her current circumstances. When asked if it was classical of somebody who had been traumatized to express fear, she said yes, she was very afraid. And it was then the judge asked, does this particular her talking about Nikita expressing fear, she didn't know whether to elaborate or not. So the judge asked, does this particular fear and being afraid relate to your psych evaluation? And she said no. So the judge told her to move on.
Right.
She then said that by the end of her report, she diagnosed her with PTSD and noted that she was getting treatment in terms of both therapy and medication. Again, like we described, that SSRIs, those antidepressants.
Right. So is Nikita Hand finished with her evidence to the jury at this stage? Has she more witnesses to call, or will we be moving on now to the case of the defence, which is Conor McGregor and his friend James Lawrence?
So that seems to be what's going to happen, yeah. So about 1:00, Mr. Gordon notes that it was, well, he said it's 1:00.
Yeah.
And he said it was coming up to lunchtime, and because at this point they were going to bring out their next witnesses, which we heard was going to be 3 members of An Garda Síochána. So after lunch, we had short cross-examination from Dr. Leader, and she was just asked if she had seen CCTV of Nikita Hand, and she said no. It was also, she agreed that she had been retained by Miss Hand's solicitor. Yes. And also she confirmed that one of the requirements of having PTSD is that there is a traumatic event. So there's no cross-examination by James Lawrence's defence team. And then we're told there's going to be 3 Garda witnesses. So the first Garda witness comes on the stand, and it's Detective Sergeant Peter Woods from Blackrock Garda Station. And he describes the various qualifications he has in relation to being a serious crime interviewer. He lectures in crime interviewing at Templemore, and was experienced in enhanced cognitive interviews, which is the type of interview he said he did with Nikita Hand. He said it's the best practice, the kind of interview they would use. It kind of gives the person being interviewed free recall of an episodic event. And he said that this is used in serious cases such as murder, kidnap and rape. Then there was, he confirmed that on the 11th of January, which is the Friday, he got Nikita Hand's phone for analysis and her jumpsuit. So this jumpsuit was then presented to the court. It was taken in an evidence bag. He put on some gloves, removed it from the bag, agreed, yes, this is the jumpsuit that I was given from Nikita Hand. Then he says that Conor McGregor was arrested on suspicion of rape of Nikita Hand on January 17th. So at this point, the judge asked the jury to leave. The jury, when they returned to court, we hear that court is finished for the day, and that there will be some final evidence from the plaintiff. And then we would move on to the next stage of the trial, which we know will be Conor McGregor's legal team and their defence.
So they have some final evidence to give, so they may have one more witness to give. We were told there was going to be 3 members of the Garda Síochána, but we've only heard from 1.
Yes, so we seem to have been told that that matter has now been dealt with. The Gardaí will not be on the stand anymore. We won't be hearing any more evidence from them. Who we will be hearing from tomorrow is, I believe, the forensic it'll be relating to forensics evidence, and also we'll be hearing from a damages expert. So this is in particular, this is in relation to the damages sought by Nikita Hand, obviously as part of her civil case. It's money is kind of the end. Yes. Of all of this. It's not going to be criminal charges as you might expect in a criminal trial, guilty, not guilty. This will be in relation to awarding damages to Nikita Hand. So they're going to have somebody up on in that relation tomorrow. And then it will move on to witnesses being presented by Conor McGregor and James Lawrence's legal teams.
Okay. So tomorrow is day what of the trial?
Day 6.
Day 6, okay. So it's likely to probably last for the rest of this week?
It sounds like it to me, yes.
Yeah, certainly seems to be going. Okay, Clodagh, thank you very much.
Thank you.